Hello and welcome to session 2 of Mindful Drawing. And these next exercises we're going to look at line shading. Before we move on to that, I'm just going to recap on the first two exercises that we did. If you can remember that far back, we did a couple of, I think we did one drawing the one here on the left hand side. Used a Sharpie felt tip to do that. And it's called a blind profile drawing. We were looking at a collection of objects and drawing the outline of them. This one on the right hand side is one I did in Biro afterwards. From that we did a profile drawing, which is this picture here of a collection of pens in a glass jar and a tin can. And this time we could look at what we were drawing, but the idea was to keep the pen on the paper, so we've got a continuous line. Obviously we couldn't rub out, so it kind of teaches you to just concentrate on the line and not worry too much about the end result, just training our hand-eye coordination. So that's why there were some warm-up exercises there. So today we're going to look at some shading exercises. As you can see, there's a list there. We've got 5 exercises. The first one we're going to do is hatching, which is at the top. We'll go through that in a minute. It's just a series of lines in one direction of varying lengths. The cross hatching is the same as the one above it, the hatching, but a line goes perpendicular to the first lines. So it builds up more dense, sort of interesting shading to give the illusion of a sphere in this case, in this exercise. Contour hatching is a little bit more difficult, the third one down, using curved lines to follow the outline of the sphere in this case. So you're trying to give the illusion of form to this flat shape. Scumbling, this is an interesting one. Tiny squiggly circular lines it describes it as here. I call it scribbling, controlled scribbling it says here. Yeah, people can use various methods of doing it. It can be jagged, it can be round like in this case, depends on your mood really. And finally, stippling. This is quite time consuming, the one on the bottom there. It's basically lots of dots, concentrating more dots in the areas you want darker and less dots in the areas you want lighter. So we'll go through those in a minute, but we're going to start with the hatching. So before we can start, we can draw, I'm just going to get my compasses here. We can draw a circle, and you can draw around something if you prefer. This gives you quite an accurate circle shape. My board doesn't move around like it normally does in these exercises. There we go, that'll do it. So for this one, I think I'm going to use a propelling pencil. So this gives you a constant piece of graphite lead. If you can see, coming up close there, it's got a lead coming out to the end of it, which you can adjust the height of with a little button at the top there. So if you want a longer lead, you can push it out like so. If you want to release it back in, you can push the top and push it back into the length that you want it. I usually have that much coming out. If you press too hard and you got too much coming out, it'll bend and snap. So it's only about 0.5 millimeter thick, if that. So that's what we're going to be using today. It'll give us quite a sharp line. So we're going to start with the first exercise, which is the hatching. And we're going to start at the top. I'm going to hold my pencil awkwardly, just so that you can see over the top for the video. And I draw holding the pen and pencils like this quite a lot. You tend to use the arm more rather than the wrist if you're using it in that direction. But when something's on an easel or flat on a desk easel like this, it's easier to use it in this direction. But do whatever comes naturally to you. So we do these exercises to be mindful. If we can do a repetitive exercise like this, it gives us something to concentrate on, something to occupy your mind, sense of achievement. If you notice, as I'm putting these lines on, I'm lifting off as I go along. I'm not, let me do an example. I'm kind of doing this rather than that. So we don't want a sharp end to the line. We want it to taper off at the end there. Also, what I've got to do is add my direction of light. So we're imagining light is shining on this sphere in this direction. So this part here is in shadow. So imagine we've got a ball on the table that we're copying from. So let's carry on with these lines, keeping them parallel. I might do them slightly further apart. Then we can add more lines later. So we're trying to get to the edge of the circle. Don't worry too much if you go over it like I'm doing. It's not an exact science. So we come all the way down to the bottom here. So that's the first row of lines of kind of medium length. So for the second lot, we're going to do slightly longer lines. So we're going to try and put those kind of in between what we already have. They're a bit close at the start because I spaced them a bit tightly initially. So let's put these next ones in between these lines as we come down. So we're going further out into the circle or the sphere. And we're still going from the edge because we want to build up a density of line there, but less line as we come into the middle. So work our way down. The more of these you do, the more trained your hand and eyes become. The important thing is to try and get the lines at this point going in at the same angle and the same direction, so that you get this single hatching effect. So yeah, that's the second bunch of lines gone in there, the longer lines. Now the third I'm going to do shorter to give a bit of darkness around this edge. So I'm going to go from the top again, still holding my propelling pencil awkwardly. You probably start to see we're getting a shaded effect towards there. Sometimes if you're using a pencil, if you turn it like I'm doing, you can get a sharp line again because obviously the pencil wears out as you're using it. It's a little bit darker as well if you turn it, which is good for this edge. So you want this to appear darker than the rest of it. I'm speeding up a bit here. So I'm resting my finger on the board here just to give me a bit more control. If you're doing it flat on a desk, you'll be able to hold your pen like that and use the heel of your hand a little bit to rest, keep your pen or pencil steady. So doing all these lines is quite mindful. I suppose it's like knitting or any other like colouring. If you use some of these complex colouring books, you don't have to think too much about what you're doing, but it is quite good for your concentration and focus. It enables you to just focus on the task you're doing rather than worrying about other things that are going on in your life. So let's have a look at that. I'm kind of looking back from it a little bit more now. It's nearly there. It's got the kind of effect that I want. Might add some slightly longer lines, so it's just a matter of adjusting it so that it looks like a sphere. So I'm just going to put some lighter longer lines going into this kind of lighter section, but I'm keeping the spacing wide. Keep them random. And then also I'm going to put some darker ones in again, so I'm going to go down that inside. I'm pressing on a little bit harder. If you're using a biro, it would probably have a similar effect. As you can see, it's starting to look a bit darker on that edge. Just worth taking your time. I'm rushing a little bit, so mine's a bit scruffy, just for the purposes of video. But you can take your time on this a little bit. Depends how neat you want it to be. The real aim is to try and get that illusion of form for this flat circle. So I think that's worked fairly well. We've got a suggestion of shading, what we call value, added to that flat circle, that flat shape, and it's starting to look a bit more like a sphere. Next we'll be doing the cross hatching, so watch out for the next video. Thank you.